What happens when entitlement meets power? A woman dripping in diamonds walks into a first-class airport lounge. She sees a black CEO in the seat she wants, so she doesn't ask. She snatches it using a tactic so vile you'll have to hear it to believe it. But she has no idea who she just crossed. She just made the biggest mistake of her life, and she's about to learn that karma doesn't send a text message. It lands a private jet on the runway right in front of her. The red alert on Marcus Thorne's desktop wasn't a notification. It was a declaration of war. It pulsed on his 80-inch monitor, an angry crimson eye staring back at him in the penthouse office of the Aura Tech Tower. The message was simple. Hostile bid initiated DuPont Capital. Marcus, the 42-year-old founder and CEO of Aura Tech Innovations, didn't flinch. He was a man carved from focus and pressure. In a world of flashy tech billionaires, he was an anomaly. He wore a simple black quarter-zip and dark denim, his wealth visible only in the quiet confidence of his posture, and the Patek Philippe on his wrist, a gift to himself when his AI-driven logistics platform first saved a Fortune 500 company from collapse. "They're not just at the gate, Ari," Marcus said, his voice calm, speaking into the speakerphone. "They're in the courtyard." Ari Vipal, his chief legal counsel, sounded like he was gargling gravel on the other end. "Marcus, they're moving fast. DuPont isn't a barbarian, he's a plague. He doesn't just buy companies. He guts them, sells the organs, and burns the carcass. The bid is 20% over market. Half the board is already getting twitchy." "The legacy board members," Marcus spat the word legacy, tasting like ash. He meant the men his father had known, the ones who still saw him as the kid who got lucky, not the man who built a $30 billion empire from a single line of code. "They've called an emergency meeting," Ari said. "Not here. Neutral ground." "Where?" "Jackson Hole. The Amangani. 48 hours." Marcus swore, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The lights of Austin glittered below a city he had helped redefine. Jackson Hole. A classic old money power move. A place where billionaires went to play cowboy and sign deals that crushed competitors. "Fine. Get the G700 fueled. I'll be at the hangar in an hour." There was a terrible pause. "Marcus, we have a problem. The G-Food and the G-Fee are grounded." Marcus turned slowly from the window. "Grounded both. What did the weather change in the hangar?" "Not weather. An anonymous tip was called into the local FAA field office." Ari said, his voice tight with fury. "Someone alleged a pattern of maintenance log discrepancies in our entire corporate fleet. It's procedural harassment, pure sabotage, but it's effective. They're grounded pending a full audit. It'll take a week to clear even with our connections." Marcus closed his eyes. This was DuPont. This was Arthur DuPont, a man known for his scorched earth tactics. He hadn't just launched a financial attack. He had cut off Marcus's mobility. He was trying to keep him from the meeting, to make him look weak and unprepared. "He's trying to make me miss the vote," Marcus whispered. "It's worse, Marcus. He's not trying to make you miss it. He's trying to make you crawl to it. He wants you to show up late, flustered on a commercial flight, while he descends from his gold-plated chariot, looking like a king." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Book me on the next commercial flight out of Austin Bergstrom. First class. Connecting through Denver, Dallas, whatever it takes. Get me to Jackson Hole, Ari. I don't care if I have to ride a damn donkey. Booking it now. American flight 1211 to DFW, then a connector on a regional jet to Jack. You leave in 3 hours. Send the car, I'm coming down. I'm full." He grabbed his go bag from a minimalist wardrobe, a simple black leather weekender by Carl Friedrich. He was the CEO of a $30 billion company, a man who could move markets with a single memo. And he was about to be crammed into a metal tube with 200 other people, all because Arthur DuPont had decided to play dirty. As he walked through the silent, cavernous lobby of his own building, the weight of the fight settled on him. This wasn't just about business. It was about respect. Auratech was his life's work, a company built on innovation and merit. DuPont Capital was a vulture fund, a relic of an old guard that believed power was a birthright to be taken, not a privilege to be earned. The drive to the airport was a blur of phone calls. Ari was confirming his proxy votes. His CFO was running stress tests on a poison pill defense. His PR head was drafting a statement of confident refusal to the bid. Marcus was the calm center of the storm, his mind a chessboard calculating 10 moves ahead. He was so focused he barely noticed the woman, 2 people ahead of him at the private first-class check-in. But he heard her. "What do you mean my bag is 2 pounds over?" The voice was a high, grating noise that cut through the quiet hum of the lounge. "I'm flying first. That means first. Do you know what this bag is?" "It's a Birkin. The baggage inside is worth more than your entire uniform. Weigh it again." The gate agent, a consummate professional, kept her smile frozen. "Ma'am, the 50-pound limit is a federal regulation for our handlers." "Then get 2 handlers." "This is ridiculous. I am Caroline DuPont. DuPont. Does that name mean anything to you? I am meeting my husband. We are buying... Well, it doesn't matter what. Just fix it." Marcus felt a cold stone drop in his stomach. DuPont. It couldn't be. He looked closer. The woman was in her mid-50s, rail-thin, dressed in a head-to-toe Chanel travel suit that probably cost more than the agent's monthly salary. Her hair was a helmet of blonde, and her face was pulled tight into a mask of expensive contempt. Caroline DuPont, Arthur DuPont's wife. She was on his flight. This was no coincidence. The grounded jets, the anonymous tip. And now the wife of the man trying to destroy him was going to be on the same plane. Marcus instinctively pulled his baseball cap, a simple, logo-free black cap lower on his head, and looked down at his phone, blending into the background. This was no longer a business trip. It was a battlefield. And the first skirmish, it seemed, was about to happen at 30,000 feet. The American Airlines flagship lounge at Austin Bergstrom was an oasis of hushed tones and clinking glasses. For Marcus, it was a sterile purgatory. He found the most secluded corner, a high-backed leather booth designed for privacy tucked away from the main bar. He needed to work undisturbed for the 90 minutes before his flight. He set down his bag, plugged in his laptop, and had 2 phones, one for secure comms, one for regular, out on the table before he even took off his jacket. His mind was already in Jackson Hole, wargaming the board meeting. He was sketching out a 4-point defense on a digital notepad when a shadow fell over his table. He looked up. It was Caroline DuPont. She was standing there, a martini in one hand, her face pinched in annoyance. Behind her, a lounge attendant hovered nervously. "This is the first lounge, isn't it?" Caroline asked, not to Marcus, but to the air in front of him. "Yes, ma'am," the attendant replied. "Then why is the best seat," she said, gesturing at Marcus's booth with a diamond-heavy hand, occupied by someone who looks like he's about to mix a rap album? "This is a place of business." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face and then return as a hot, controlled pulse. He didn't say a word. He just looked at her, his expression neutral. "Ma'am, this lounge is open to all first-class passengers," the attendant said politely, though her smile was strained. I am not all passengers, Caroline snapped, finally looking at Marcus as if he were a piece of furniture she wanted replaced. I am Caroline DuPont. I am on my way to a very important meeting in Jackson Hole. My husband, Arthur DuPont, practically owns half the real estate there. I require privacy. I require this seat. She didn't ask. She stated it as a fact of the universe, as if her desire was a law of physics. Marcus slowly took a sip of the water he hadn't touched. He could destroy her. A single phone call. He could have her name her credit, her social standing investigated, dissected and ruined by breakfast. He had legal, financial and digital weapons at his disposal that could end this woman's privileged life as she knew it. But he couldn't. A scene here now was exactly what DuPont wanted. A viral video of the angry black CEO losing his temper in an airport lounge. It would be on Fox News and TMZ before he landed. His stock would dip. The legacy board members would see him as emotional, unstable, and not a good fit for the pressure of a hostile takeover. He was trapped by his own success, his every action scrutinized through a lens that men like Arthur DuPont never had to face. "Ma'am, this gentleman is also a passenger." The attendant tried again, her voice wavering. Caroline let out a sigh of pure, weaponized exasperation. "This is not complicated. I am a platinum executive key holder. My husband spends more on this airline in a month than this person will see in his life. I want this seat." She then did something so brazen, so calculated, it almost took Marcus's breath away. She looked at the attendant. "Oh dear, it seems he's left a stain." She flicked her wrist. The last olive-soaked ounce of her gin martini splashed directly onto Marcus's laptop and his secure phone. A perfect targeted strike. "Oh goodness!" She gasped, her voice dripping with fake horror. "How clumsy of me, it's all wet. He'll have to move now, won't he, to clean up his things?" The gin stung the open ports of his laptop. The attendant gasped, rushing forward with napkins. Marcus sat frozen for a second, staring at the small green olive sitting placidly on the T key of his keyboard. He looked at Caroline DuPont. Her eyes were sparkling with triumph. She hadn't just secured a seat. She had in her mind won a small, satisfying victory of class and race. She had marked her territory. Slowly, deliberately, Marcus Thorne began to wipe down his equipment. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. "You're right," Marcus said, his voice terrifyingly quiet. "I do need to move, to clean up." He unplugged his laptop, ignoring the sticky mess. He folded it shut. He picked up his secure phone, wiped it on a napkin, and slid it into his pocket. He packed his bag. Caroline smiled, a thin, cruel slash of red lipstick. "See, that wasn't so hard, was it?" She gestured to the attendant. "I'll have another martini, and send someone to properly clean this booth before I sit." Marcus stood up, his 6'3" frame uncoiling. He paused, looking down at her. He thought of the $30 billion company on his shoulders. He thought of the 5,000 employees who depended on him. He thought of the war room in Jackson Hole. He gave the lounge attendant a small, reassuring nod. "It's all right." Then he looked at Caroline DuPont. He said nothing. He simply held her gaze. He let her see the cold, ancient calm in his eyes. It was a look that said, "I see you." And then, with a silent grace that was more menacing than any threat, he turned and walked away. He found another seat, a cramped, noisy one, near the bar. He pulled out a backup device, a military-grade tablet, and got back to work. But his focus was gone. It was no longer just about the company. It was personal. She had drawn first blood, and she had used a tactic so vile it had succeeded. She had made him retreat. He watched her as she settled into his booth, laughing on the phone, one manicured hand swirling her new martini. "Darling, you won't believe the riffraff they let in here." The boarding call for Flight 1211 to DFW was a blessed relief. The cabin of the 737 was a different world. Marcus was in seat 2A, a window seat in the first-class cabin. It was his preferred spot, power outlet, privacy of view. As he settled in, stowing his single leather bag, he tried to put the lounge incident out of his mind. It was a distraction, a sideshow. The real war was waiting in Wyoming. Then he heard her voice again, sharp as shattered glass. "No, no, no. That won't do." Caroline DuPont was standing in the aisle, staring at her assigned seat, 1D, an aisle seat. Her eyes, however, were fixed on 1A, a bulkhead window seat occupied by a kindly-looking man in his 70s reading a newspaper. "Excuse me," she said to the flight attendant. "I'm supposed to be in 1A. There's been a mistake." The flight attendant, already harried by the boarding process, pulled out her device. "Ma'am, I have you here in 1D. Seat 1A is Mr. Henderson." "I don't care who Mr. Henderson is," Caroline hissed, loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "The window! I need the window. Do you know who I am?" Before the flight attendant could answer, Marcus watched in something approaching clinical fascination as Caroline turned her venom on the elderly man. "Sir," she said, her voice a sickly sweet syrup. "You are in my seat. You'll need to move." The man looked up, bewildered. "Pardon, my ticket says 1A. "And my comfort," Caroline said, "dictates that I sit there. I am a very nervous flyer. I must have the window." She placed a hand on her chest, a piece of amateur theatre. "My husband, Arthur DuPont, would be furious if he knew you were making his wife this distressed." The man, a gentleman of a generation that was taught to appease, began to stammer and fold his paper. "Oh, well, if it's a medical—" "It is," Caroline said, cutting him off. "Severe. Now, if you please." The man, flustered, began to gather his things. Marcus couldn't watch. He was about to speak, to tell the man to stay put, to call the flight attendant, when a different kind of alert vibrated in his pocket. Not his phone. A different device. It was a small, credit card-sized tracker he kept in his wallet, a personal security measure. It was a silent proximity alarm, keyed to specific hostile signals. It was vibrating. He looked up. Caroline DuPont was still harassing the old man, but a new passenger was coincidentally creating a logjam right next to Marcus's seat 2A. The man was large, dressed in a nondescript blazer, and was fumbling with his roller bag in the overhead bin. He fumbled and fumbled and fumbled, blocking the aisle his back to Marcus, but his arm, the one with the oversized smartwatch, was dangling just inches from Marcus's stowed bag under the seat in front of him. The alarm in Marcus's pocket vibrated faster. It wasn't a watch. It was a scanner, a data skimmer. They were trying to wirelessly pull the data from his laptop while it was in his bag. This entire scene, Caroline's performance, the fumbling passenger, the logjam. It was all a coordinated, sophisticated physical attack. Marcus reacted instantly. With one fluid motion, he pressed his foot down hard on his bag, activating a manual pressure lock on the case. Then he took his own phone, turned on the camera, and angled it just so capturing the man's arm, his watch, and his face in the reflection of the cabin window. He spoke his voice low and sharp, cutting through Caroline's tirade. "You're blocking the aisle. Move! The man with the watch froze. He heard the steel in Marcus's voice. He looked over his shoulder, saw the phone angled toward him, and his eyes widened in professional panic. He had been made. He snapped his overhead bin shut empty and muttered, "Sorry, wrong row." He then scrambled past a fuming Caroline and disappeared into the economy cabin. The entire exchange took less than 10 seconds. Caroline, having successfully bullied the old man into seat 1D, was now settling into 1A, oblivious to the techno-thriller that had just unfolded behind her. Marcus's blood ran cold. This was so much bigger than a seat. The grounded jets, the lounge harassment, and now a physical attempt at data theft. DuPont wasn't just trying to win a boardroom vote. He was trying to steal Aura Tech's core intellectual property. He was trying to get the Project Chimera files, the next-gen AI platform Marcus had, on his encrypted drive. The cabin door closed. The fasten seatbelt sign chimed. Marcus looked at the woman in 1A, now happily ordering a pre-flight champagne. She wasn't just an entitled wife. She was a decoy. A noisy, obnoxious, human-shaped, "Look over there" sign, while the real professionals tried to pick his pocket. The plane began its pushback. Marcus sat back in his seat, his mind racing faster than the jet engines. They had failed to get his data on the ground. They would try again in the air. He pulled his laptop from his bag, the one Caroline had spilled gin on. He booted it up. The screen flickered, but it came to life. He opened the Wi-Fi portal. "Welcome to AA in-flight Wi-Fi." He typed in his credentials and hit connect. And that's when the real attack began. The moment Marcus connected the plane's Wi-Fi network, that notoriously slow, unreliable service became a digital hunting ground. His laptop, a custom-built hardened device that was supposed to be a fortress, suddenly lit up with warnings. Intrusion attempt, port 445. Intrusion attempt, port 139. Brute force SSH detected from 192,168 toward 104. They weren't just trying to get in. They were using a battering ram. The IP address, 92.168.1.104, was coming from inside the plane. The man from the aisle. He was in coach, logged into the same network, and was now launching a full-scale assault on Marcus's machine. Marcus's fingers flew across the keyboard, a concert pianist in a war zone. He shut down non-essential ports, rerouted his firewalls, and started a counter-trace. He was a coder before he was a CEO. This was his home turf. He saw the attack shift. The brute force attempts stopped. A new vector opened. His battery life, which had been at 98%, suddenly plummeted. 98%, 85%, 72%. It was a juice-jacking attack, but a wireless version. They were overloading his CPU with millions of ghost requests, a denial-of-service attack, scaled down to a single laptop designed to overheat his machine force, a shutdown, or drain his battery before they landed. He killed the Wi-Fi. The battery drain stopped. Silence. He was now in the air, thousands of feet above the ground, with no connection to his team. He was isolated, blind. And the most dangerous part of his journey, the 3-hour layover at DFW, was still to come. He looked at Caroline DuPont. She had a silk eye mask on and was fast asleep, a tiny bubble of champagne foam on her lip. The perfect distraction, the perfect ignorant accomplice. Marcus Thorne was not a man who accepted a no-win scenario. He closed his eyes. He wasn't thinking about the code. He was thinking about the system. A commercial flight. A go-go in-flight network. A plane full of people. And an attacker. He had a second laptop in the reinforced lining of his bag. A clean one. But he couldn't risk bringing it out. The attacker would see it and know he had a backup. He needed a connection. He needed Ari. He looked at his secure phone, the one Caroline had baptized in gin. It was dead. The gin had done its work, shorting the charging port. His other phone, his public iPhone, was working, but connecting it to the compromised network was suicide. He was cut off. The flight droned on. Marcus sat perfectly still, his mind spinning. The attacker in coach was waiting for him to get desperate to turn on his Y1 more time. And then a new notification popped up on his iPhone. Not an email, not a text, a calendar invite. From sales@yourgogoinflight.com. Subject: your Wi-Fi session. Feedback: location. Seat 14B. It was a trap, a spear phishing attempt. They were trying to get him to click a link that would no doubt install a keylogger on his phone. But they had made a mistake. They had given him a piece of information. Location: seat 14B. The attacker's seat number. Marcus smiled. A cold, thin predator's smile. He hit the flight attendant call button. The attendant, the same one from boarding, appeared. "Yes, Mr. Thorne." Marcus kept his voice low. "I need you to do something for me. And it is very important that you do it discreetly." He pulled out his black card, the Amex Centurion. "There is a gentleman in seat 14B. I would like to buy him a drink. A lot of drinks. In fact, I'd like to buy him a bottle of your best champagne. Tell him it's from a secret admirer and that he's won the in-flight lottery." The attendant looked confused. "Sir, we don't sell bottles." "Then," Marcus said, not breaking eye contact, "keep the champagne coming, as much as he can drink, and a round for everyone in his row. Tell them it's a celebration, courtesy of the man in 14B. The attendant's eyes widened as she saw the card. She understood. "Right away, Mr. Thorne." Marcus sat back. He watched as 5 minutes later, a flight attendant joyfully descended on row 14. He saw the man, the same man, from the aisle, look up confused as champagne was popped. He saw the passengers around him cheer. He saw the man awkwardly accept the glass, then another, and then another. The digital attack on his laptop didn't resume. It's hard to run a sophisticated cyber assault when you're suddenly the center of a mandatory high-altitude party. Marcus had disarmed the attacker, not with code, but with champagne. But the larger problem remained. He was still disconnected. He had neutralized the immediate threat, but he was still a blind man walking into a war. The plane began its descent into Dallas-Fort Worth. Marcus looked out the window. The fight was about to move to the ground, and he knew DuPont's men would be waiting. He needed a new plan. He needed to get a message to Ari, and he needed to do it in a way no one could trace. As the plane taxied to the gate, he powered on his laptop one last time. He didn't connect to the Wi-Fi. He opened a simple text file. He began to type. Ari compromised. G100, G550 grounding was phase 1. Physical attack on plane 12E11. Attacker in 14B neutralized. Caroline D is decoy. They are trying to steal Chimera. DFW will be hot. They know my face. They know my devices. He paused. How to get the message out? He couldn't use a phone. He couldn't use Wi-Fi. He looked at the elderly man in 1D, the one Caroline had bullied. The man was packing his simple bag. Marcus made a decision. He copied the text file onto a tiny, nondescript USB-C drive. He walked up the aisle as the unfastened seatbelt sign dinged. Caroline was already on her phone complaining. "Yes, we're on the ground. A dreadful flight." Marcus stopped at seat 1D. "Sir," he said, his voice quiet. The man, Mr. Henderson, looked up, startled. "Thank you for your grace earlier," Marcus said. "Oh," the man said, flustered. "It was nothing, son." "It was something," Marcus said. He pressed the small USB drive concealed in his palm into the man's hand, a handshake passing a secret. "This is going to sound strange, but I am in a bit of trouble. I can't make a call. The people I'm with, they're watching me." The man's eyes, clear and sharp, looked at Marcus, then at Caroline, and he understood. "My daughter is picking me up at baggage claim," Marcus continued. "She's a college student. I need you to make a phone call for me, from a payphone or a borrowed phone, not your own." He palmed the man a folded piece of paper. On it was Ari's number. "Read this number, and only this number, to the person who answers. The number. That's it. Nothing else. Then destroy the paper and this drive. Drop it in a trash can. Can you do that for me?" The man looked at the USB drive, then at Marcus. He saw the desperation, but also the ironclad competence. This wasn't a man in panic. This was a general giving a field order. "The number on the paper, to the person who answers. Then destroy everything." Mr. Henderson said, his voice firm. He'd found his spine. "I can do that, son. Godspeed." Marcus nodded. "Thank you." He walked off the plane right behind Caroline DuPont into the humid air of the DFW terminal. He was empty-handed. No secure phone, no laptop, no connection. He was walking into the lion's den with nothing but his wits. And he had just entrusted the fate of his $30 billion company to a random stranger named Mr. Henderson. The DFW Admirals Club was a sprawling, multi-level testament to corporate travel. It was also, Marcus knew, a perfect box, a kill zone. There were only a few exits, and he was certain all of them were being watched. He walked in trailing Caroline, who was already at the bar demanding a proper champagne, not this Prosecco filth. Marcus ignored her. He was scanning. Two men in ill-fitting suits at the entrance, their eyes never settling their hands, never far from their pockets. Another man, the coach attacker from 14B, looking hungover and furious, was standing by the flight monitors. He was no longer a digital threat. He was a physical one. They were corralling him. Marcus walked to the far end of the lounge to the quiet zone and sat down, his back to a wall, his eyes on the entrance. He had a 3-hour layover. 3 hours to survive. He pulled out his public iPhone. He knew they were watching it, probably with a Stingray device nearby, spoofing the cell tower, intercepting everything. Good. He wanted them to watch. He opened his email. He started drafting a long, panicked-sounding email to his CFO. Massive security breach. They're inside. The Chimera files are... He wrote it, deleted it, rewrote it. He was playing the part of the panicked CEO. He was giving them what they wanted to see. While their digital eyes were focused on his fake panic, his hands were busy under the table. In his bag was his last line of defense. It wasn't a phone. It wasn't a laptop. It was a device that looked like a simple black power bank. But it was a hardened military-grade satellite uplink. It didn't use Wi-Fi. It didn't use 4G. It communicated directly with a private Iridium satellite constellation. He plugged a micro cable from the device into his phone's charging port. He wasn't charging it. He was pushing a pre-typed encrypted message. The message was one word: rat trap. He hit send. A tiny green LED on the device flashed once, then went dark. The message was gone. It was hurtling toward a satellite in low Earth orbit on its way to Ari Veepel's own secure device. Rat trap was the fail-safe. The burn it all down command. It was the contingency plan they had created years ago, after a similar, smaller scare. It was a digital dead man's switch. If Marcus ever sent that signal, it meant he was physically compromised, that all other lines of communication were hostile, and that the company was in mortal danger. In the legal offices of Aura Tech in Austin, Ari Veepel was pacing his office chewing on an unlit cigar when his secure phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. From M. Thorne, MSG Rat Trap. Ari's blood turned to ice. He hadn't heard from Marcus since the text about the grounded jets. He had been expecting a call from DFW. Rat Trap was the one message he had prayed he would never see. It authorized Ari to do the unthinkable. "Sarah," Ari roared, bursting out of his office. "Get me the SEC Enforcement Director's private line. Now. And get the Wall Street Journal's finance desk. Tell them I have a comment on the DuPont Capital bid." He ran back to his desk and unlocked a biometric safe. He pulled out a fireproof case containing a single air-gapped hard drive. On that drive was 2 years of opposition research on Arthur DuPont. Auratech's AI wasn't just for logistics. Marcus had secretly pointed its analytical power at his greatest rival. The drive contained a labyrinth of shell corporations, illegal offshore accounts, falsified asset reports, and proof of systemic market manipulation. It was a poison pill of pure, unadulterated, career-ending data. Ari plugged the drive into a secure terminal. He sent the first file a detailed map of DuPont's illegal Cayman Island holdings to the SEC. He sent the second file proof of DuPont's bid being funded by a consortium of sanctioned Russian oligarchs to the Journal. Then he made his third call. "This is Ari Veepel for Director Evans at the FAA," he said, his voice now calm and lethally cold. "Yes, I'll hold." A moment later. "Director. Yes, thank you for taking my call. I'm calling about the anonymous tip regarding Mr. Thorne's fleet. We have compelling evidence that the tip was a malicious and fraudulent act of corporate sabotage originating from a phone bank linked to a known subsidiary of DuPont Capital." "Yes. The same DuPont Capital that I believe the SEC is just now opening an investigation into." "Oh, you're seeing the alerts now. Wonderful. We need those jets cleared for flight. Immediately." Back in the DFW lounge, Marcus Thorne sipped his water. The men in suits were still watching. The man from 14B was still glaring. Caroline DuPont was now holding court by the window, bragging to a hapless stranger about her husband's brilliant takeover strategy. "He's an artist, really," she was saying. "A sculptor. He sees a bloated, badly run company, and he just trims. He's going to trim that tech boy, what's his name, right down to the bone," she cackled. Marcus closed his eyes. The signal was sent. The trap was sprung. All he had to do now was wait. The digital bomb he had just detonated had a 30-minute fuse. He watched the big-screen TVs above the bar. They were all tuned to CNN, the sound muted, a story about Congress, a weather report. Then at 3:17 p.m. Central Time, the entire wall of televisions flickered. The red breaking news banner flashed across every screen. SEC launches emergency investigation into DuPont Capital, alleges massive systemic fraud. The sound in the lounge was suddenly on, flooding the room. Sources say the allegations include illegal offshore tax shelters and fraudulent reporting of assets to inflate a recent hostile takeover bid. The man from 14B went pale. His phone buzzed. He looked at it, his eyes wide with terror. The two men at the door didn't look at their phones. They looked at each other, then at the exits. They were no longer hunters. They were prey. They vanished into the crowd. But Marcus wasn't watching them. He was watching Caroline. She hadn't seen the TV. She was still deep in her story. And Arthur said to him right to his face, "You're a child playing in a man's world." Her phone rang, a custom ringtone. "Money, Money, Money" by ABBA. "Arthur, darling," she trilled, answering it. "I was just telling this lovely man about your—" "What?" Her smile froze. The color drained from her face, leaving a pasty white mask. The champagne flute slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. What do you mean, frozen?" she whispered. "Sheol." "Arthur. What's happening, Arthur?" She wasn't looking at the TVs. She was looking at Marcus Thorne, who was now standing up, packing his bag. He hadn't moved. He hadn't said a word. But he had just brought her entire world crashing down from 40,000 feet away, using nothing but a one-word signal from a power bank. The first domino had fallen. The terminal at DFW's gate D34 was a different kind of zoo. It was the gate for the small 50-seat Embraer 145 regional jet to Jackson Hole, a puddle jumper. The prestige of the flagship lounge evaporated here. This was a place of cramped seats and no overhead bin space. Marcus arrived calm, collected his simple black bag over his shoulder. He looked like any other traveler. Then Caroline DuPont arrived. She was a hurricane of Chanel and panic. She was no longer on the phone. She was screaming into it. "Arthur, you listen to me. You fix this. What do you mean? Call the lawyer." "You are the lawyer's problem." She was disheveled. Her perfect blonde helmet of hair was askew. Her mascara was running. She looked broken. She saw Marcus standing by the window waiting to board. Her eyes red-rimmed and wild locked onto him. "You!" she shrieked, stabbing a finger at him. The entire gate area went silent. You did this." Marcus didn't move. He just looked at him, his face a mask of detached curiosity. "You, with your computer. You ruined him. You ruined me," she screamed, taking a few steps toward him. "We were going to buy you. We were going to turn your little company into a parking lot. How did you do this?" Marcus said, his voice flat and calm. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Liar!" she spat. "You're nobody. You're just you're the help. You're not supposed to win. Arthur is Arthur DuPont. He's a lion. You're a mouse." A gate agent stepped forward. "Ma'am, you need to calm down. We're about to board." "Calm down." Caroline laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "My life is over and you want me to calm down? My credit cards are declined. Declined. Do you know who I am? A passenger on this flight, just like everyone else," the agent said, her patience clearly gone. "If you can't compose yourself, you will not be flying." The threat of being grounded, The one thing she had probably never experienced seemed to hit her. She stopped, her chest heaving. She was trapped. The SEC investigation had frozen her husband's assets. The black cards, the private lines of credit, the invisible shield of money that had protected her. It was all gone, evaporated in a single breaking news alert. She was just a woman in an airport with a declined credit card. Tears of pure, unadulterated rage and self-pity streamed down her face, carving black tracks through her expensive foundation. She looked at Marcus, her expression collapsing from fury into something ugly and pleading. "Please," she whispered, a sound so quiet he barely heard it. "Call it off. Whatever you did. He'll stop the bid. We'll give you anything. Please." Marcus looked at her for a long, cold moment. He thought about the gin on his laptop. He thought about the elderly man she'd bullied. He thought about the riff-raff in the lounge. He thought about the 5,000 jobs he had just saved. "Ma'am," he said, and his voice was not unkind, but it was final. "You should call your lawyer. It sounds like you're going to need one." He turned his back on her. "Now boarding Group 1, the gate agent announced. Marcus walked past the agent, scanned his boarding pass, and walked down the jet bridge. Caroline DuPont stood frozen in the middle of the terminal, surrounded by people who were pretending not to stare. The last time Marcus saw her, she was sliding down the wall, her phone to her ear, listening to the dial tone of a disconnected life. He stepped onto the small, cramped regional jet. He was still flying commercial. He was still in a race against time. The board meeting was still happening, but as he settled into his narrow seat, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Ari. "FAA cleared. G700 is en route to DFW. Wheels up in 40. I'll meet you in Jackson Hole." Marcus looked at the text. He looked out the tiny window of the Embraer jet. And then he had an idea. It was audacious. It was petty. It was, he decided, poetic justice. He sent a text back to Ari. "New plan. Divert the G700. Have it park at the private signature terminal at DFW. Wait for me. Ari, park Marcus the meeting. Marcus, trust me, the board can to wait 20 minutes. He hit send. Then he unbuckled his seatbelt, stood up, and walked back up the jet bridge against the flow of boarding passengers. The gate agent looked at him astonished. "Sir, you're going the wrong way." "Change of plans," Marcus said, a small, genuine smile finally touching his lips. "I won't be flying with you today." He walked out of the gate, past the weeping, shattered form of Caroline DuPont, and headed for the exit. He was done flying commercial. The jet bridge was a tube of humiliation. Caroline DuPont, her name now, a worthless jumble of syllables, was not walked. She was herded. A gate agent, her face a mask of professional unforgiving stone, had marched her to the aircraft door, where a flight attendant who had clearly been briefed took over. "Ma'am, your seat is 12C. Please take it so we can close the door," the attendant said. Her voice wasn't kind. It was the voice of a person whose only job was to get this human problem from point A to point B. The aisle of the Embraer 145 was barely wide enough for a single bag, let alone the shattered remains of her pride. The other passengers, the ones who had witnessed her meltdown at the gate, stared. They didn't stare with awe, as they should have. They stared with a mixture of pity and contempt, their eyes following her as she stumbled her Chanel scarf, dragging on the carpet. She found 12C. It was not a window. It was not an aisle. It was the vestigial middle seat of a plane that shouldn't have one, but was crammed next to the rear lavatory. The air was thick with the chemical blue smell of the bathroom and the sour milk stench of defeat. The fabric of the seat was a nubby, stained blue, and the non-adjustable armrest was sticky. "I am Caroline DuPont," she whispered to herself, a mantra that had lost all its magic. It was a prayer to a dead god. The cabin door thudded shut, a mechanical final sound. She was sealed in, trapped. The plane began its slow, chugging taxi, vibrating in a way that felt cheap, like a piece of industrial farm equipment. She was surrounded by people. A man in a stained polo shirt was already snoring in the window seat. A woman across the aisle was clipping her fingernails. This was her life now. This was the world Arthur's incompetence, no, the man in the lounge, his sorcery, had relegated her to. The plane lurched to a stop, not at the runway, but just short of it on a vast, shimmering heat haze of concrete. The pilot's voice crackled over the ancient intercom, the static making it sound like a message from a distant, failing world. "Folks, apologies for this. We're going to be holding here on the tarmac for a few minutes. A priority aircraft has been given clearance to depart ahead of us. We should be on our way shortly." "Priority aircraft." Caroline spat her voice, a venomous broken croak. The words were a personal, calculated insult. She was no longer priority. She was the delay. She was the after you in a world that an hour ago had revolved around her. She craned her neck past the snoring man to look out the small, scratched plastic window, and then she saw it. It didn't just taxi. It arrived. It was a vision in white, a machine so sleek and futuristic, it looked like it belonged in a different century. It glided across the tarmac with a silent, menacing grace, a white shark in a sea of tugboats. It was a brand new Gulfstream G700, gleaming under the Texas sun, with a single aggressive stripe of obsidian black that ran its length like a signature. It was the largest, fastest, most expensive private jet in the world. It was a $75 million declaration that its owner did not obey the same laws of physics or finance as the rest of the planet. It didn't just pull onto the runway. It positioned itself right in front of their tiny, pathetic Embraer. It was a display, a deliberate act of dominance, forcing her plane to wait like a peasant at the castle gate. Caroline's heart hammered a sick, jealous rhythm against her ribs. That was her world. That was the power she was accustomed to. She watched, mesmerized by the sheer insulting display of wealth, a privilege she had just lost. As if the scene were staged for her private torment. A black Cadillac Escalade, the 2025 model, the one with the private label tint, rolled to a stop at the foot of the G700 stairs. It was the exact car that should have been waiting for her. The driver's door opened, and a man in a crisp uniform stepped out. He opened the rear door. Caroline stopped breathing. He stepped out. Marcus Thorne. But it wasn't him, not the man from the lounge. That man had been a ghost, a quiet presence in a simple black quarter zip designed to be overlooked. This man was a god. He was wearing a dark blue Tom Ford suit, tailored so perfectly it looked like it had been woven onto his body. The Texas sun caught the face of the Patek Philippe on his wrist, a watch she now recognized as costing more than her car, as he raised his phone to his ear. He wasn't panicked. He wasn't rushed. He was laughing, a low, controlled, effortless sound that she could practically hear from 500 feet away. The laugh of a man who had not just won, but had enjoyed the game. He was transformed. He was not the riff-raff. He was not the help. He was the owner. He handed his simple black leather weekender, the one she had sneered at, to a waiting flight attendant, who took it as if it were a holy relic. He didn't look at his bag. He didn't look at the pilot. He simply began to ascend the stairs, not like a man going to a fight, but like a man ascending his throne. Caroline's mouth fell open. A small strangled noise, a dying animal sound, escaped her throat. The man in the polo shirt next to her stirred, snorted, and went back to sleep, oblivious to the divine comedy playing out on the tarmac. On the top step, Marcus Thorne paused. He turned. He was a silhouette against the sun, a figure of pure, unadulterated power. He looked back across the expanse of concrete, his gaze sweeping over the parked, delayed, insignificant regional jet. He couldn't possibly have seen her. The window was too small, the glare too bright, but it felt like he was staring into her soul. It wasn't a look of anger. It wasn't a smirk of triumph. It was worse. It was a look of indifference, a look of finality. He was a general looking back at a battlefield he had just conquered, at a city he had just razed before turning his attention to the next campaign. He didn't see her. He just saw the obstacle he had now officially overcome. Then he turned and disappeared into the cool, cream leather embrace of the cabin. Inside the G700. Marcus stepped into the jet. The scent of new leather and quiet success filled the air. Ari Veepel was on the 60-inch monitor, patched in from the Austin war room. "You're airborne," Ari said, the relief evident in his voice. "Marcus, that was theatrical. The SEC filing is public. The journal article is on every terminal. DuPont stock is in free fall. The board is assembled. They're terrified." A flight attendant who had been waiting handed Marcus a heavy crystal tumbler. In it was 2 fingers of Macallan 25. He took a sip. It was the taste of victory. "They're not terrified enough, Ari," Marcus said, his voice calm as he loosened his tie. "They're still in the lobby waiting for their king to arrive. Let them wait. I want them to read the journal article one more time. I'll be there in 2 hours." He cut the video feed and looked out the window just as the pilot throttled the engines. Back on the Emiraer. The world outside Caroline's window dissolved into a furious, deafening roar. The 2 massive Rolls-Royce engines of the G700 spooled up a sound that was not a rumble, but a scream. It was the sound of physics being torn apart by money. The jet wash, the sheer hurricane force exhaust from the Gulf Stream, slammed into their small plane. The Embraer rocked violently. Passengers yelped. The man next to her woke up with a shout. A drink from the front row flew into the aisle. It was a final physical insult, a slap in the face delivered by a jet engine. And then, as quickly as it had arrived, it was gone. The G700 shot down the runway, a white scalpel cutting into the heart of the blue Texas sky. It was airborne in seconds, lifting with an effortless, arrogant grace. It banked hard to the west, a white speck disappearing in the direction of the mountains of Jackson Hole, of the meeting that would decide everything. It was gone. A full minute of silence passed. "Okay, folks," the pilot's voice crackled, sounding tired. "Looks like we're good to go. Sorry for that." The small Embraer began its chugging, rattling, undignified journey. It waddled onto the runway, its engines straining, and began its slow, stuttering ascent. Caroline DuPont sat frozen in seat 12C. She was trapped in this vibrating, chemical-scented tube for the next 3 hours. She thought about the flagship lounge a lifetime ago. "I just wanted his seat," she whispered to the sticky armrest. The irony was so acidic it burned her throat. She had tried to snatch a man's chair, believing he was nothing. In response, he had grounded her husband. He had frozen her assets. He had destroyed her life. And then, as a final exquisite act of karmic brutality, he had landed his private jet on the runway right in front of her just to show her exactly who she had messed with. The riffraff was at 40,000 feet, sipping scotch and deciding the fate of the world. And she was in coach. She thought his color made him inferior. She thought his commercial ticket made him weak. She learned as she watched his G700 take off that she hadn't just misjudged a man. She had misjudged the entire game. She played checkers in a world of 3D chess, and the man she tried to break was the one who invented the board. Karma isn't always instant, but when it arrives, sometimes it comes in the form of a breaking news alert. And sometimes it lands a private jet on the runway right in front of you. What did you think of Marcus's final move? Was it pure class or perfect cold-blooded revenge? Let me know in the comments below. And if you love stories where entitlement gets exactly what it deserves, do me a favor. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe for more stories of karma power and the justice we all wait for.